The leading cause of death in construction is falls from elevations. In the painting and finishing trades, working at elevation is normal to your work. As such, fall protection is vital to your safety on the job. Fall protection is a systematic approach to identifying where fall hazards exist, implementing a protective system, and using that system throughout the work process. Please note that failure to wear fall protection when and where required is considered a serious violation of your employer safety rules and grounds for discipline up to and including dismissal. Fall protection is an essential element in keeping you safe on the job. Identifying fall hazards is relatively easy. Whenever you have to work more than 6 feet off the ground, there must be a fall protection system in place. In some cases, fall protection would be required below 6 feet, as when you're working over dangerous equipment. In these cases, there's no trigger height. You just have to be protected before leaving the ground. Additionally, if you have to work in aerial lifts, scissors lifts, or swing stages, and they could be 2-point, multi-point, or single-point scaffolds, you must have fall protection in place before leaving the ground. The primary types of fall protection that you'll encounter will be personal fall arrest systems, PFAS, which include a Class 3 full-body harness, a lanyard, and attachment point. Guardrails, which include a top rail at approximately 42 inches, mid-rail, half the distance between top rail and deck, and toe boards, 4 inches in height and located on all open sides. Floor covers. Holes greater than 2 inches in diameter must be covered and marked. Floor hole covers must sustain at least 2 times the maximum intended load. Nets. Nets can be suspended between floors and many times on the exterior of open-sided floors and structures. A fall protection plan. In some instances, like residential construction, a fall protection plan is used. This plan, while very limited in its application, will outline the fall hazards in the workplace and the controls instituted to help keep you safe. Your employer will provide you with training on the fall protection plan if applicable to your work. Your employer will also provide you with fall protection training because of the variety of fall hazards encountered in your line of work. Hazard recognition is of utmost importance if you're to remain safe on the job. Always keep your eyes out for open-sided floors, skylights, even skylights that are covered, and floor holes. Additionally, learn how to use ladders properly, as well as how to ascend, descend, and work safely on scaffolding and on lifts. An essential element in keeping you safe is daily inspection of your protective systems. If you're using a body harness and lanyard, on a daily basis, inspect the webbing and make sure that it's free from knots, cuts, burns, or any other damage that could affect its safe use. Inspect all equipment, hardware, snap hooks, D-rings, and buckles for damage. If damage is found, return the equipment to your foreman. Do not use damaged or defective equipment. Part of your inspection should also include the attachment point. Check what you're attaching to. Is it secure? Will it hold up if you fall? Whatever it is you're attaching to must be capable of supporting 5,000 pounds per employee. Lanyards should be inspected daily as well. Now, the maximum length of a lanyard used for fall protection cannot be greater than 6 feet. Some lanyards are equipped with shock absorbers in protective casings. Inspect every component of your system to ensure that it will work if it's needed. When wearing a PFAS, some guidelines to follow are: never attach 2 lanyards together to make a longer one. Never tie a knot in your lanyard. Never wrap your lanyard around something like a pole and tie back onto the lanyard. Use a beam strap. A good rule of thumb is that your lanyard always hangs free from the attachment point. If using a shock absorber, the shock absorber should be attached to the D-ring on the back of the harness. To ensure proper fit, you should always be able to grab the D-ring by reaching over your shoulder behind your head. And use the 4-finger rule. Your harness should be snug, not binding. If you can run 4 fingers around the webbing, the harness is fit properly. Always connect all the buckles when you wear a harness. Your employer will provide you with more training on using a PFAS. Here are some simple tips on donning the harness. Inspect the harness for damage or deterioration. Always grab the harness by the D-ring and shake it out. Grab the shoulder straps and put the harness on just like you'd put on a coat. Before connecting the buckles, make sure you can grab the D-ring by reaching behind your head and simply grabbing it. This will ensure that the harness D-ring is in the proper position on your back. Connect the leg straps, connect the breast strap, and to ensure a comfortable fit, slide 4 fingers palm side along the lengths of the webbing. The harness should be snug but not binding. Have a coworker inspect the harness for proper fit. Inspect the lanyard for damage or deterioration, and attach the shock absorber to the D-ring. One of the common tools used in the painting and decorating trades is the ladder. There are 4 basic types of ladders used in construction: straight or extension ladders, step ladders, fixed ladders, and in some rare instances, job-made ladders. Regardless of the type of ladder used, the most important steps in keeping you safe are using the ladder properly and inspecting the ladder prior to use. Most ladder accidents are the result of improper setup. Each of the ladders that I mentioned has characteristics unique to that style or type of ladder. Now, your employer will provide you with training on the proper use of the ladders that you'll be working with. Most of the ladders used in construction are manufactured ladders. Extension ladders and step ladders are the common types of ladders used. Any manufactured ladder used in construction must be capable of supporting at least 250 pounds. Now, this duty rating is a method of telling you how much weight the ladder is capable of holding. In construction, ladders must have a minimum duty rating of 1, 250 pounds, 1A, 300 pounds, or 1AA, 350 pounds. These duty ratings must be posted on the ladder to readily identify its load capacity. Job-made ladders have very specific design protocols, and for the most part, you'll not be involved in building job-made ladders. However, the need for inspection still rests with the user. Your employer can provide you with more training on the use of job-made ladders. Now, once the ladder capacities are known, the next step is to inspect that ladder. Prior to use, do a thorough inspection of your ladder. Check rungs and cleats for damage. All ladders must have feet or stable bases. On step ladders, these feet can be a boot or simply a rubber tread. On extension and straight ladders, the feet are usually a swivel base. Regardless of the type of ladder, it needs to be equipped with adequate feet. Check the side rails to make sure that they're parallel, smooth, and free of damage. Check the working parts of the ladder. On step ladders, the locking brackets should be capable of being locked into place. On extension ladders, the rung brackets must have spring-loaded closures and must fully seat on the ladder rung. Extension ladders cannot be separated to be used as 2 ladders. Inspection of the ladder is one of the most important aspects of safe use. Now, your employer will provide you with training on how to inspect the types of ladders that you'll be using. And once the ladder's been inspected, the next step is to set that ladder up properly. First, inspect the work area. Check for anything that could affect the safe use of the ladder and possibly result in an accident. Once you've inspected your work area, you're ready to set up the ladder. Now, while setup is easy, remember these simple steps. Check what you're setting your ladder on. Is the foundation adequate to support the load? If not, use a mud sill to help ensure your footing. A step ladder's locking brackets must be locked in the full open position. Step ladder stability is based on 4 points of contact. Step ladders cannot be used in a straight ladder configuration. With straight or extension ladders, the proper angle of repose must be attained. A 4-to-1 ratio is the proper angle of repose, and what this means is simply for every 4 feet of rise, you are 1 foot away from the face of the work. A simple way to determine this is to stand on the feet of the ladder and straighten your arms at 90 degrees and grasp either the rung or the side rail. This is a good indicator that you're at the proper angle of repose. Now, when working on ladders, keep these simple practices in mind. Always maintain 3 points of contact when climbing: 2 hands, 1 foot, or 2 feet and 1 hand. This will help to maintain balance while climbing and working. Also, don't carry tools or materials when you're climbing a ladder. Raise these items to your work area. Remember, 3 points of contact while using the ladder. Another good practice is to keep your belt buckle between the uprights or side rails of the ladder. This will help you maintain balance and avoid tipping the ladder due to overreaching. Clean your shoes off. Make sure that you're not creating a slip hazard. Clean the mud, oil, or other substances off of your shoes before climbing. When you climb, look up. When you descend, look down. If you must work off of a ladder, never climb higher than the 3rd rung from the top on straight or extension ladders and the 2nd step or cleat on a step ladder. And take your time. Smooth and steady when you climb helps to maintain stability. If you're using the ladder to gain access to another level, the ladder must extend 36 inches above the landing plane and be secured to prevent displacement. The 36-inch rule is to provide you with the means of maintaining your balance when you transition off the ladder. If 36 inches can't be attained, then grab rails or other means must be provided to allow you a safe transition. Ideally, the ladder should be tied off or secured at the top and bottom. As a minimum, tie off or secure the ladder at the top. Look for electrical hazards. If you must work around energized electrical sources, remember the 10-foot rule. For power sources up to 50,000 volts, you must maintain at least 10 feet of clearance from that source, unless the source is turned off and visibly grounded. Assume that all electrical sources are energized until you make sure the source is turned off. Your employer will give you more information and training on energy isolation and lockout-tagout. One common misnomer is what's commonly called a non-conductive ladder. Don't believe it. Remember, the safe use of ladders is based on your understanding the hazards in your work environment and controlling those exposures. Another tool of the trade is scaffolding. There are 3 primary types of scaffolding used in the painting trades: ground-based systems such as tubular welded frame, suspended scaffolding such as 2-point suspended swing stages, or aerial lifts such as scissors lifts and articulating boom lifts. And you know, since falls are the leading cause of death in construction, it is essential that you understand the proper use of these devices. Do not use any type of scaffolding or elevated platform unless you've been trained and authorized to work on that device. Now, when you're working on a scaffold, and to assist you in working safely on a scaffold, the employer must have a competent person knowledgeable about the type of scaffolding being used. The competent person is defined by OSHA, is one who through education, training, or extensive knowledge has the ability to identify unsafe and unsanitary conditions in the workplace, and who has been authorized by the employer to make corrective changes. In other words, this is a person who is familiar with the style and type of scaffold used, including the hazards associated with that scaffold, and most important, one who has the authority of the employer to make corrections so the scaffold is safe for use. Your employer will have a competent person who will tell you about hazards that are specific to the scaffold used on site. And just as critical, what must be done to correct any hazards. Using scaffolds safely is of the utmost importance to your safety and that of your coworkers. Your employer will give you additional training on the safe use of these devices. The key to keeping you safe is to thoroughly understand the type of scaffold that you're using. It's essential that you understand the hazards associated with that type or style of scaffold and what methods are used to control those hazards and working within those controls. Your employer will provide you with education and training on the specific types and styles of scaffolds that you'll be using. Hey, regardless of the type of scaffold used, the following steps should be taken every time you work on elevated platforms. The following are elements of safe scaffold use that you must be aware of. These items should be understood before using any type of elevated work platform. What are the fall hazards? Now, OSHA requires a fall protection method, primarily guardrails, for any ground-based scaffold erected in excess of 10 feet in vertical height. Many employers use 6 feet in vertical height as the trigger height for installing fall protection. Guardrails are the primary method of fall protection on scaffolds used in our industry. Trigger heights may vary from 0 to 10 feet depending on the type and style of scaffold used. Your responsibility is to learn the specific trigger height for the situation that you're working in and always use it. Ideally, your protection from falling starts before you leave the ground. You need to know what the fall protection method is before you get on any type of scaffold. Without this knowledge, you have a major exposure to falling. As we've discussed, guardrails are the primary method of fall protection. Guardrails must be installed on all open sides of your work platform, with the top rail at approximately 42 inches above the deck or platform and a mid-rail installed at half the distance between the top rail and the deck. If guardrails are installed, then toe boards, a minimum of 4 inches in height, should be installed on all open sides of the scaffold as well. Check your guardrails at every level. A damaged or defective guardrail can get you killed. Please note that on suspended scaffolds, there's no trigger height for a fall protection system. In fact, before you leave the ground on a suspended swing stage or an aerial lift, you must have a personal fall arrest system independent of the rigging system. Your personal fall arrest system consists of a Class 3 full body harness, a lanyard that limits the free fall distance to less than 6 feet, and an anchorage point that will sustain at least 5,000 pounds of impact. Additionally, you must have a guardrail system installed on all open sides of the suspended platform that you're working on. When working on aerial lifts, the same rules apply. Before leaving the ground, protect yourself by making sure the guardrail system and personal fall arrest system are in place and secure. Scissors lifts are a little different, as full guardrail protection is required before leaving the ground. However, a personal fall arrest system may not be required. Many employers will require the additional protection of a personal fall arrest system. Your employer will give you more training on the use of these devices. Remember, regardless of the type of scaffold used, you must understand what method is used for fall protection. What and where are the electrical hazards? If you're exposed to energized electrical lines, remember the 10-foot rule. For power between 300 and 50,000 volts, you have to maintain at least 10 feet of separation between the scaffold and the energized electrical source. As voltages increase, so does the distance. Below 300 volts, simply avoid contact. The important point is to be aware of any energized electrical source and understand how that source is isolated or controlled, such as a lockout or tagout. You have the right to know how any type of energized source could affect the safe use of the scaffold, as well as what method is used to control that exposure. Hey, how much weight will your scaffold hold? Now, there are significant differences between ground-based scaffolds, suspended scaffolds, and aerial lifts when it comes to the amount of weight and the number of persons that can occupy these devices. Weight load limitations and occupant loads are specific to the type and style of scaffold used. You have to know what these limitations are. Your employer will train you on the use of these various devices. Do not use any type of scaffold if you haven't been trained in the proper handling of materials and the proper use of the scaffold. Another area of concern is how you access these elevated platforms. Regardless of the type of scaffold used, you have to be able to access the scaffold safely. OSHA requires that any scaffold more than 2 feet above the ground have a safe means of access. This means that access is provided in the form of a ladder, stair, and in some cases, the ability to climb the frame. Climbing of cross braces is strictly prohibited. Safe access means you have the ability to maintain your balance throughout the climb and the ability to access the work platform safely. Your employer will provide further training on the types of access that they use for gaining access to the elevated platforms. Other hazards must also be considered. For instance, falling object protection. In other words, the potential for you to be struck from overhead work or items falling off your scaffold and striking someone below. If there is the potential for falling objects, then there has to be a method of protecting workers below your scaffold, as well as protecting you while working on the scaffold. The following are simple guidelines. If you have an exposure below, then tow boards and protective nets must be installed on all open sides of your work platform. If you have an exposure from above, there has to be a method of deflecting falling objects away from workers on the scaffold. Hard hats will provide you with minimum protection from things striking your head. However, they're not adequate for this type of exposure. It's vitally important for your safety that you understand the hazards associated with the type of scaffold that you use and how those hazards are controlled. OSHA requires that you're trained and that you understand the following: the nature of any fall hazard, electrical hazard, and/or falling object hazard in the workplace, how these hazards are controlled, the load capacity and occupant load limitations of the scaffold used, the proper handling of materials on that scaffold, how you access the scaffold, the result of the daily pre-shift inspection or inspections as a result of events that could affect the safe use of the scaffold. Every time you work at elevation, take the steps necessary to protect yourself. While your employer has to provide you with the tools necessary to work safely on a scaffold, it's your responsibility to use these protections every time. We've covered a lot of material in these safety sections, so don't feel bad if you have to go back and repeat some of the material to be clear. You can use the DVD menu to review as much or as little as you'd like. Remember, safety is everyone's responsibility and job number one every day. Good luck out there and keep it safe for everyone's sake.